people, in a lighting industry where we have seemingly hundreds of LED flat panels and hundreds of LED downlights, there's a much shorter list of high quality companies that provide specialized light fixtures for vandal resistant, correctional, healthcare, food service, and other specialty applications. One of the companies that's been on that very short list for decades is Kenall Manufacturing. And we're pleased today to be joined by the president of Kenall, Pat Mary. Pat, hello, and thank you for joining us today for 5 big questions.
Hello, Al. Thanks for having us on, and very happy to be here.
Pat, very pleased to have you on board with us today. Pat, there's been lots of companies that have healthcare platforms, and Kenall has had a healthcare products vertical market focused product platform for many, many years, and certainly a broad product offering in that category. As that category continues to grow and actually spurn more competitors, what's been your approach to that vertical market?
Well, for healthcare, Kenall always approached that as a specification grade manufacturer. So healthcare has a lot of common features with some of our other vertical markets, in particular sealed enclosures used for clean rooms. So dust-proof, waterproof, able to withstand harsh cleaning chemicals. Those are all things that are also common in healthcare, where the highest spec requirement is in the operating room. So that's where the company started, in healthcare several decades ago. And then we've expanded into switchable colors for arthroscopic surgeries, multi-mode fixtures for patient rooms. MRI suites cannot have any ferrous metal or switching electronics inside the room. So again, a very specialized product. And that really fits Kenall's model. Now, even before the pandemic, the US healthcare system was making some significant changes to become a much more decentralized model. So outpatient surgery centers are more and more common. These are places where the requirements are still driven by operating rooms, but there's no admissions, there's no overnight stays. They're actually set up like a production line. It's first in, first out. I fixed your knee, you can go home now. But they're more cost sensitive, and everything needs to be inherently clean because they can't take the same amount of time that a hospital does to clean the facility. So again, some unique spec requirements there. Now with the COVID-19 pandemic, you mentioned that there's a lot of other companies getting into healthcare. Hospitals were hit harder than many people believe during the pandemic. So while they were still very busy, with lots of patients, some of whom very serious, their elective surgeries were either greatly curtailed or in some cases completely shut down. And for a hospital, elective surgeries are where the profit is. So because of that, there is a significant impact, certainly not as much as, for instance, the commercial office space. And now it's definitely starting to come back. But the main thing we see now in healthcare is that as it's opened up again, these facilities need to reassure both their patients and their staff that they have a safe space. People want to know they're going to be okay coming back into that hospital.
And let's stay with that theme, because one of your trademark products or formulas that go into many of your products is the Indigo-Clean, which was around before the world knew what COVID was and before the lighting industry got educated on all the various wavelengths of UVC and 405 nanometer ultraviolet light. And your solution is unique, and it's been around for a long time. And there was recently some testing that happened that shows that actually does deactivate the virus that causes coronavirus, and it does so without UVC light. So tell us more about that big news.
Yeah, so this is obviously something that Kenall's been working on for 7 years. The original biomedical research was done at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. Kenall is a licensee of the university's patents, and then we've developed our own product lines, and we now sublicense those patents to other companies. But this was really a huge effort for a lighting company. And at the time we started this, we were still privately held. So we had to be careful what we were doing financially. But we hired, 8 years ago, a PhD in physics, Dr. Cliff Yankee, as our director of clinical affairs. And that's a really unusual skill set for a mid-sized lighting company to have. But without that, we would not have been successful, in this market. But our original focus was again on operating rooms, because Kenall has a very established presence, in that market. But they needed to fight antibiotic-resistant bacteria, such as MRSA, which typically only occurs in hospitals because of the heavy use of antibiotics there. It was already a spec-driven market, so it was ideal for Kenall. In the 5 years since we've been shipping that product, we have over 300 installations, and we have demonstrated surgical site infection reduction of up to 80% in a given facility. So while we don't know the numbers, we're confident that people's lives have been saved by the use of Indigo-Clean. Now, several years ago, there was some research done again by the University in Scotland that showed inactivation of certain viruses, but they couldn't explain the kill mechanism, because a virus and a bacteria are put together a completely different way. But with the appearance of COVID-19, Dr. Yankee started looking for a research partner that Kenall could work with who had access to the real SARS-CoV-2 virus. So we did not want to use a surrogate. Any surrogate testing is going to be completely dismissed. So we found a biosafety level 3 facility in New York City, and basically this is a lockdown facility, full mask, full body suits, that conducted the test on SARS-CoV-2 using a Kenall downlight that came right off of our production line. We literally took it off the line and shipped it to New York City. That research showed a 94% kill of SARS-CoV-2. We originally tested against one of the earliest strains that spread here in the US. We've now tested against both the UK and the South African variants with exactly the same results. What we found is we're also effective against influenza A, which is a constantly mutating flu virus. So the fact that we work against all these different viruses has now led to some pretty good understanding of the mechanism that's actually being used to kill the virus. But airborne respiratory viruses are a recurring threat to humans. And they will be even after COVID-19 recedes. SARS, MERS, COVID-19, who knows what's next. But Indigo-Clean, we've found, is extremely effective against airborne particles because the light's hitting the virin from all angles, in addition to working on surfaces. So the main difference that we see with Indigo-Clean is that it's visible light disinfection, and therefore is safe for continuous human exposure, unlike UV. We don't do any UV work because we're just concerned from a safety point of view. But once Indigo-Clean is installed, it works continuously. It works without any training or intervention from the hospital staff or the facilities people. So our goal is to provide safe spaces, in hospitals, in schools, in commercial offices. And we think it's a big game changer in the lighting industry.
Yeah, makes sense. And even, COVID-19 is the big headline in 2020, but as we emerge out of COVID-19, and you just talk about, helping a school or an office building, have less flu. I mean, that's a big benefit as well.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears to one of the things you mentioned a moment ago was when you were privately owned, which now shows that you have different ownership.
That's right.
And I heard an interesting anecdote from one of your longtime and very proud Kenall agents, who was a principal of the agency in a large market. And he said that every year at the agent breakfast at Light Fair, the previous CEO, or rather the owner and CEO of independently owned Kenall, Jim Hawkins, would start each Light Fair meeting saying, Kenall's not for sale, I'm not for sale. And then he didn't show up to 2018 Light Fair due to a conflict. And months later, Kenall was sold to Legrand. Now that could have been an embellished story, but I found it entertaining. But nonetheless, now it's been almost 3 years now since Legrand acquired Kenall and has a few, specification oriented lighting brands in its stable. But overall, when you look at the Legrand financials, they're still a wiring device and power and electrical type company. So how, from your perspective as a performance focused, spec focused lighting brand, what types of changes have you seen under Legrand ownership, and what types of adaptations is the company making under the new ownership?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, your story's slightly embellished, but it's close. Jim would get questions from the agents who want Kenall to remain independent, and then he get calls from big lighting companies and other private equity, whatever, to say how much to sell. So he was kind of stuck in the middle. But I think with the acquisition by Legrand, and it was very unique, we managed to stay and still act as an independent lighting company. And by that I mean we still have our own sales force, our own marketing, our own product roadmap, our own manufacturing facility, and that structure of staying independent, it was one of the main reasons that Legrand was the successful acquirer of Kenall. If it would have been someone else, we would have just been assimilated and would be a brand, but no longer independent. So that said, there are benefits in being part of a larger corporation. Manufacturing process improvements are shared across many businesses, including those that have nothing to do with lighting. During the pandemic, having a centralized HR organization was a great resource to wade through all the CDC guidelines and best practices so that we didn't have to do that ourselves. And Legrand also pushes a innovation methodology based on the customer experience. And that means instead of just innovating the product, which as an engineering driven company, that's what Kenall has always done, we can now we're actually required to look at the whole value chain, from design to sourcing to marketing, on-time delivery and support of our agents and customers. So it's been a huge benefit. I think our agents, for the most part, have indicated that they still see us acting the same way. And that's good, because we didn't want to make any major changes there in how we address the market.
That is good. If you can do those changes and the marketplace sees no step backs and continued step forwards, that's a great thing to say. And when you think about some of your sister lighting brands under the Legrand umbrella, names that our audience knows, such as Finelite, and Focal Point, and Pinnacle, and OCL, it's fairly common for the brands under Legrand to have separate agents, 3 or 4 different agents in any given territory. But we have seen a shift in a few markets, a couple of them very large Northeast markets, like say Boston and New York, where 5 or 6 Legrand brands, lighting brands, are consolidated under the same agency representation. What are your thoughts on a potential shift to that type of agent Legrand consolidation?
Well, as I mentioned, we all 5 of the lighting companies, we still have our own independent sales and marketing organizations, and as each of those companies were acquired by Legrand, a major reason for each of that is that we all have our own unique agent networks, and that really hasn't changed. There have been agent changes done by one lighting company that had absolutely no input or no impact on the other lighting brands. Now we do share overall market condition information, so that we all kind of say, okay, is the market recovering now in the Bay Area, for instance, which has been one of the benefits of being part of Legrand. But one thing we never talk about amongst the lighting companies is specific projects or customers, because in many cases we're all competing against each other, and we want to stay independent. And more importantly, we all have commitments to our agents to support them to win those businesses, those jobs, all that individual business, even if it means we're competing against another Legrand brand, which in many cases we are, that's fine. You know, we all want to be represented by the strongest agent in each market. So I think it is inevitable that in some small number of territories will be represented by the same agency. But I think that's extremely rare. You know, for instance, at Kenall, I share more agents with one of the major lighting companies than I do with Finelite. And, you know, that's just the way things have worked out. But again, there are cases, and you noted a couple where, you know, it was determined that what was best for the market at that particular time was, you know, happened to put us under the same agent umbrella. But that was a very rare case, you know, out of what, 50 some major markets in the US, you know, one or two. You know, our job is to help the agent win that total project by supplying those specification grade products that are unique to that job. Kenall doesn't provide everything on the lighting schedule. We don't need to. The agent does that with their other manufacturing partners. And as we talked about, you know, our previous private ownership, I mean, we're all seeing kind of an interesting change dynamic in the market. You know, there's generation turnover throughout the lighting industry, you know, whether it's at agencies or in the manufacturers. You know, there's consolidation going on, you know, both at the agent level and at the manufacturing level. And then there's also technical innovations, you know, like Indigo-Clean or the Internet of Things that are kind of disrupting prior relationships. 10 years ago, the strength of an agent's controls segment was not nearly as big an issue as it is now. You know, so those kind of things drive a lot of change. But the important thing for Kenall is we're not going to let those changes pass us by. If we resist that change, that's a problem. You know, we need to be able to adapt and invest where we think we're going to be successful. And as long as that allows us to remain leaders in our particular market segments, then that's what Kenall and the other Legrand lighting companies intend to do.
No, understood, and it's good to hear those perspectives. And I accidentally said 5 or 6 lighting companies, but there's 5 lighting brands. I thought Wattstopper was a lighting brand, but I remember now it's in a different division. So, but even still, that it still applies because they're autonomous to the other 5 as well. So, and when you consider, you know, some of the things, I remember like vandal resistant fixtures, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we used to call them architectural ugly.
Yes.
Your company has done a good job of improving the aesthetics of that. Your company's done a good job, as we mentioned, about expanding to specific vertical markets, whether it be transit or something very specialized like food service or food processing. So when we look at the future of what Kenall is working on and might deliver in the future, where do you see the company innovating and continuing to grow and provide innovative solutions for the market in the future?
Okay, well, I think it's interesting that you noted the aesthetic shift in our product line. Our marketing people will be very, very heartened by that. Because you're right, some of the early, especially high abuse fixtures, you almost look like you just knocked it out of a rock, and here it is. But again, in those early markets, and that's, you know, where Kenall first came out with high abuse fixtures, they were for the Chicago housing projects, and the #1 concern was to resist vandalism. So it didn't need to be pretty; it needed to withstand a baseball bat. But that is now different, and we are consciously trying not necessarily to broaden our target markets, but we're trying to serve them all better. So there are new voices, new decision makers, you know, new influencers within each market. You know, we see the requirements of architects and designers, you know, being much more important than they were 10 years ago. And some of that is because now with the advent of LED technology, the lighting engine and the fixture enclosure are no longer separate items. now they can be fully integrated. And that gives you a lot of flexibility to make things that just simply have a much better aesthetic. So for instance, even parking garage fixtures, which, at one time a simple vapor type was sufficient because we just wanted to provide light. Now some parking garage fixtures are, they're almost a work of art. And we realize that that's something that we have to incorporate into our products. And we're starting to do that with some of our recently launched new products. But as for the future, I guess I come back to the LED technology. One of the things that Jim Hawkins, our previous owner, used to always ask me is, when will Kenall become an electronics company? Because of my background. And I kind of said, well, that's kind of a double-edged sword. Do you want to be? But I think the lighting market, not just Kenall, is moving into the semiconductor era. Semiconductors this century are going to be what oil was to the world economy in the last century. It's going to be absolutely required. So in the lighting market, we're no longer just a light source. Now we can disinfect, or we can provide security, we can provide surveillance, or energy efficiency. So I think those technological breakthroughs driven by the semiconductor market is really where there's a huge shift going on right now. And Kenall intends to lead in that area. I mean, we have very strong product marketing and engineering organizations. That kind of evolution, it's in our history and it's in our DNA, and that's how we want to keep it.
Pat, it's always great to hear you speak about your brand and your company, and your future plans sound exciting. And I think you're spot on about semiconductors and the importance to the present and future economy there. So thank you so much for sharing time with us today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights into the 5 big questions. And we appreciate you very much. So thank you, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure.
Hey there, we really enjoyed that discussion. We hope that you did as well. Be sure to click that big LED logo next to me, and what that'll do is subscribe you to our YouTube channel so you don't miss the next 5 Big Questions interview. And YouTube subscribers always receive an early preview to the next interview before we even post it on the Inside Lighting website. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.